morning. That's okay. We'll go ahead and get started. I think last Sunday school lesson kind of quit on a terrible note, really. Samuel, what God told Samuel was, they haven't rejected you, Samuel. They have rejected me. Who has rejected me? God's people that he called out of Egypt in a mighty special way. After all that was said and done, God says, Samuel, they haven't rejected you. They've rejected me. You know, the Bible is more negative than it is positive. We live in a world where positivity is, you have to be positive, you know. Just be positive, just be positive. Well, the Bible is so full of the negative, but you know, if it wasn't for the negative, we wouldn't even know the positive. We wouldn't even recognize the positive. We would not, if it was all sunshine and roses, do you think we'd ever understand and know the grace and the mercy of God? So, the last time we were here, they had rejected God as being their ruler. God had used what? Judges. Who was the last judge that we've learned about? Samuel. But in the very last book, or the very last chapter of the book of Judges, you know what you find? Benjamin in a terrible light. Very negative towards the tribe of Benjamin. I don't want to rehash that and get back into the book of Judges, but I say, you know, here we are in 1 Samuel. Go back and read the last chapter of the book of Judges and see what kind of sorry state the tribe of Benjamin had gotten themselves into. That's how that book finished. That's how it ended. The reason I say that is because what is today's lesson? God's going to give him a king. If you want a king, here's your king. His name is going to be Saul. So back in Judges 21, you thought, you know, Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin was more or less done. If you'll go read that, you'll kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. Well, here today, Israel has rejected God as king, and now they want a king, and God's going to give them a king. He's going to give them a pretty gnarly man. We're going to learn today about this guy if we have time. But, you know, when I think of, you know, there's another king coming after this one. I guess I'm going to be jumping ahead. Sunday school. Man after God's own heart. Right? You know what the Bible says about him? Ruddy. He was ruddy. He was a ruddy little shepherd boy. What does that mean, ruddy? I think the word literally means red. But polar opposite of the guy we're looking at today. The guy we're looking at today, we would say is, you know, in the world's eyes, perfect. The perfect king, the perfect man, gnarly man, big tall man, Benjamite, his family, the Bible, well, we'll get that in a minute. So, God's going to give the children of Israel what they want, exactly what they want. Not just a king. This dude is a gnarly man. The kind of a man that everybody wants for their king. Conan the Barbarian, you know. Big old gnarly, you know, sword-swinging, gnarly man. If we want a king to rule over us like all the nations around us, God's like, okay, you want a king? I'm going to give you one. I'm not just going to give you a king. I'm going to give you a gnarly, bad-to-the-bone king. A well-known man, or a man of renown whose family was a family of renown. Every kingdom's dream of a king. It's kind and a man we're going to look at today, but I couldn't help but notice how terrible of a state we found the tribe of Benjamin in Judges 21. And then I think of the man after God's own heart, not Saul, but David, who was ready. Little sheep herd, little sheep boy. And then I can't help but fast forward all the way to the man we celebrate today, the most celebrated man in our world, Jesus. Bible says had no form of comeliness about him. Nothing to be desired. So you kind of just, want to take an overall big look at it. God does not think like men. He doesn't operate like men. Okay, you want a king. I'm going to give you one. We're going to look at him just a little bit today. But then you find the one after God's own heart, David, the ruddy shepherd boy. And then you fast forward all the way to Jesus, who grew up stonemason in a little town called Nazareth, 70 miles away from Jerusalem, up in a little place called Galilee. Had no form of comeliness about him. Nothing to be desired. So I think we should always keep that in mind when we look at God and his ways and his word. And we should always come to the conclusion that he don't think like we do. We have an ideal about how things should go and what needs to happen here, what needs to happen there. Got it fixed in our mind as men. This is what should happen. But God, we should always learn, don't think like men. Another wonderful thing you'll notice about the future lessons that are coming. Now, what would you do if you were rejected? 100%. Don't want you anymore. Give me something else. What if your kids come up to you, Mama? I don't want you as a mama. I want her as a mama. This would be I want this mother. You're not a good mother. You've been a terrible mother. Yeah, I'm done with you, Mama. Now that mom over there now. If I could only have that one. Well, same thing. What if you was a daddy and your kids come to you? No, I want that. Why can't you be like that daddy? Why can't you be this man or that man? I want him instead of you. What would you do if you were rejected by your people? If you had the ultimate power, the ultimate power, and I'm talking about strength and authority to do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, with no effort at all, what would you do? But what did God do? All right, y'all want a king? My people, whom I love, whom I got out of Egypt, whom I have taken care of. You want a king? Guess what? Here's you a king. I'm going to give you the best, one of the most gnarly men we could find in Israel. A Benjamite on top of that. So that brings us to today's lesson, I hope. These days I study the wrong lessons a lot. Yep. Saul is chosen king. I've been practicing reading from my Bible, so I think I've done that the last couple of times I was here, so I'm going to continue trying to do that. But let's turn to Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. So we're all clear on we want a king like the other nations to rule us. We want to be like the nations around us. Now, can we be, here I'm still introduction, can we be guilty of wanting to be like these people or those people? Wanting this or wanting that in order to make our life fulfilled? Huh? Can we do that? Can we look at the world and go, oh, if only I had that in life, then my life would be better. More or less what they said. We want to be like the nations around us. What were they looking at? the nations around us, around them in those days. We want a king, like they have a king, to rule over us. And I think I discussed the fact that it doesn't matter if God is using a 15-year-old or a 90-year-old to do work. Who's doing the work? God is doing the work, and He can do it through a 15-year-old or through a 90-year-old. And the result will be exactly the same if He's the one doing it. So, and I think we talked about last week that they got a pretty good speech from Samuel over this. And I think if I looked at that speech correct, it was harsh. It was hard. It wasn't no mealy mouth, patty cake little sermon. He come down on these people for wanting a king rather than a judge that God used. So, okay, now then. See, I don't write my sermons. Sometimes it'd be good if I did, but I just brought that up. I think we should just be in the right mindset before we look at this chapter, okay? Are we all there? All right, now, 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. The burrows, I titled this little section here, 1 through 5. The burrows and the goodlier. The goodlier. That's a weird word, isn't it? Now there was a man of Benjamin, verse 1, whose name was Kish. Now, I challenge you, go back and read Judges 21. Check out Benjamin a little bit. His name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Becharath, the son of Aphi, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. Talking about Kish. Kish was a mighty man of power. He was not a pushover Benjamite. He was a well-renowned, well-respected, I imagine very well thought of. He was a good guy, good man. He's a mighty man of power, and he had a son. So this very prominent man had a son. That would make his son what? Just right out of the box. Very prominent. Oh, that man and his son. That man and his children. That man and his family. Here it comes. He had a son whose name was Saul. A choice young man. And a goodly. Don't y'all love old English? Old 16th century English. And there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier, that's what I was talking about, a goodlier person. Goodlier, I looked it up, that word means pleasant, agreeable, appropriate, welfaring, beneficial, happy. What a good thing to have said about you, huh? All those things. Ain't that what we live for in America today? That attaboys right there, that goodlier, don't we love to get an attaboy like that? He was all of these things in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of Israel, in the eyes of Benjamin, in the eyes of his daddy Kish. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher. You know, we'd say in America, he was taller than everybody else. A lot taller than everybody. Not just little, but shoulder up. That's pretty good. You know, most men were this tall to him. And I'm pretty tall, but every one of y'all this tall to me. So this guy, he was huge. On top of that, he was just a good boy. Well respected, a fine young man. The son of Kish. Verse 3, and the asses, or burrows, of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. So, what did Kish, makes me wonder if they weren't burro farmers. You know, the burro was not a very well thought of animal in these days. They were cheap, man. They were worthless. So, but I don't know what I don't know, man may have been a sheep farmer, but I don't know. He may have just been a farmer of lots of things. Maybe he just had lots of animals, but his herd of burros disappeared. They got lost. And Kish said to Saul his son, "Take now one of these servants with thee, and arise and go seek the burros." Y'all know what a burro is?
Donkey.
You know, down here in Arkansas we have jackasses, right?
Yeah.
That's not a burro. Burro are little. It's a burro. Jackasses are horse size. They're a cross between a horse and a burro. That's what a jackass is. But these are burros. Funny thing, I guess I should mention this. I lived out in Arizona for a long time, and you know what there were everywhere? Burros. Nobody owned them. They're wild. They run wild in Arizona, especially around this one lake. I have seen so many wild burros. You know what that means? They can live off anything. They're not like a dumb sheep. Sheep you got to feed. You got to carry from pasture to pasture. Burros, no. Just throw them out the door there. Come back in a few years, there'll be a herd somewhere around there. So they went out and to look for these burros. Now, remember, burros they're like sheep. You know, the sheep, they're going to find the grass. Them burros, you know, I've never dealt with a domesticated burros, herd of burros. I've only messed with those wild ones out there in Arizona, out there in the desert. They're pretty funny and fun to mess with, really. They're pretty friendly, actually. So, domesticated burros, wild burros, that burro's a burro. They're not a sheep. So they went out. Kish said, "Boy, go find the burros. Go find the donkeys." And he passed through Mount Ephraim and passed through the land of Shalisha, but they found them not. Then he passed through the land of Shalim, and there they were not. And he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they found them not. And when they were come to the land of Zuph, Saul said unto his servant that was with him, "Come, let us return, lest my father leave caring for the burros and take thought for us." He was a thoughtful young man, wasn't he? You know, how often when you're out and about when you're young, do you wonder how your mom and daddy wonder what they think about you, if they're worried about you? Good boy. Saul was a good boy, tall boy, good-looking boy. We just read, very pleasant, very obedient to his daddy. Cared what his parents thought, cared that they may have been worried about him. So what do we know about Saul? He's a good boy, y'all. Mm-hmm. That's about all you can say. You know, a lot of people brag on their children, you know, I got good kids. But what do we like to say here? Consider the end of the conversation. I won't get into that too much. But he said, let's go back home. Daddy's going to be worried about us more than he's going to be worried about the burros. So let's go home and take care of that. All right. Now we're back to the judge, Samuel, verse 6. Now here's where I'm going to start reading out of my Bible. I'm going to get lost. Let me try to keep my finger on the place. And he said unto him, that would be the servant said unto Saul, his boss, his master. So what does that tell you about Kish and Saul? They was a gnarly household. They had servants, slaves. And he said unto him, behold, now there is in the city a man of God, and he is an honorable man, and all that he saith cometh surely to pass. Now let us go thither, peradventure, or maybe he could show us our way, that we should go. Then said Saul to his servant, But, behold, if we go, what shall we bring the man? Very thoughtful. For the bread is spent in our vessels, and there is not a present to bring to the man of God. What have we? And the servant answered Saul again and said, Behold, I have here at hand the fourth part of a shekel of silver. That will I give to the man of God to tell us our way. I think we should put it to rest right here. The prophets of God did not work for money. They did not work for the Lord for money. I just think it was just people just gave out of pure respect. They expected to receive something, so they gave something. And Saul's like, man, we can't go to this guy. I don't have anything for him. Shouldn't, Saul was thinking, shouldn't we give him something? Shouldn't we take care of him? He's a man of God. Take care of him. And the guy said, I got a half a shekel of silver. We'll give that to him. Never think that Samuel worked for money. What verse are we on? Anybody know?
9.
Before time in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, thus he spake, Come and let us go to the seer, for that he is now called a prophet, but before time was called a seer. Seer, a seer, S-E-E-R. They were called seers and previously, now they're just called prophets of God. Then said Saul to the servant, Well said. Come, let us go. So they went into the city where the man of God was. And as they went up to the hill of the city, they found young maidens going out to draw water, and said unto them, Is the seer here? And they answered them, these young maidens who were going out to draw water. By the way, is there anything in the Bible about maidens and wells? Is this the only time? Makes you wonder, in those days, things were different, right? The water gatherers and the water getters seemed to be young women. So they went and they asked these young women, Where is the seer? And they answered them and said, He is, in other words here, Behold, he is before you, he's in front of you. Make haste now, for he came today to the city, for there is a sacrifice of the people today in the high place. And as soon as you be come into the city, ye shall straightway find him, before he go up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he come, because he doth bless the sacrifice. And afterwards they eat that be bidden. Now therefore get you up, for about this time ye shall find him. In other words, get up right now. Get up here. He's going to be at this. He had, these young maidens knew exactly what was going to go on, when was going to go on. Now is the time. Go now, and you'll probably run into him. And they went up into a city. And when they were come into the city, behold, Samuel came out against them, or before them, came out in front of them, for to go up into the high place. Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear a day before Saul came, saying, so Samuel knew some things and stuff, didn't he? God told him in his ear. Remember who he is now. He's the last judge of Israel. They rejected him. They rejected God. Samuel took it personal. God said, don't take it personal. They rejected you. They rejected me. But God told him in his ear, saying, tomorrow about this time, I will send thee a young man out of the land of Benjamin, and thou shalt anoint him to be captain over my people Israel, that he may save my people out of the hands of the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people because their cry is come up unto me. I just love that about the Lord.
Amen.
They rejected him, rejected his way, rejected all of his blessings and all of his grace and all of his mercies for 1,300 years. God had been They rejected him, and he knew what was going to happen. They're going to be dissembled, disorganized, unorganized, and the Philistines are going to come in and mop up. And he said, I love my people. I can't have that. So go call this boy. He's going to be my captain. He's going to take care of these Philistines. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, Behold, the man whom I speak to thee of the same shall reign over my people. Then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, Tell me, I pray thee, where the seer's house is. Saul did not recognize this Samuel. Wonder why that is. That's always just peculiar to me. It's Samuel. He goes and he does sacrifices in different places. He's the prophet of God. And these women knew exactly what his agenda was. But Saul saw him and asked him where Samuel was. That's always peculiar to me. What's in Benjamites? You know, Kish was all that. He was a good man, a hard-working man, a man of power, great authority. But they didn't know who Samuel was. Come on, man. I just thought it was something to be thought of. Where is the seer? And Samuel answered Saul and said, I am the seer. Go up before me into the high place, for ye shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let thee go, and I will tell thee all that is in thine heart. And as for thine burrows that were lost 3 days ago, set not thy mind on them, for they are found. Samuel knew about them burrows, didn't he? I wonder how. He knew where they were. He knew they were found. He knew this boy was looking for them. So what did God speak to Samuel in his ear about? Probably more than what you think. On whom is all thy desire of Israel? Is it not on thee and on all thy father's house? And Saul answered and said, am not I a Benjamite, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel? And by the way, go back and read Judges 21, and you'll see that that boy ain't exaggerating. See what happened to Benjamin. He says, we're the simplest, smallest, most worthless tribe of all of Israel. And my family, the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin. Now what do we know that is to be? A lie. He's just being humble. Maybe he was just being humble. I don't know. But he says, my family's not, I'm of the tribe of Benjamin, the smallest tribe, but my family in the tribe of Benjamin is nothing. What does the Bible say? Kish, great man of power, well-known man. He's just being humble. And I think the Bible does say something about Saul being humble when he was young, but then, we don't want to get into next week's lesson, do we? Wherefore then speakest thou so to me? Why are you talking to me, Samuel? Why are you telling me these things? I'm nothing. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the parlor and made them sit in the chiefest place among them that were bidden, which were about 30 persons. So there was 30 people in the room. Samuel took him in and put him in the chief spot, where the chief, you think a tribe of people, you think a group of people, and there's going to be a head table. Put Saul in the head spot, in the head table. Saul became the center of attention amongst these 30 men. I don't know what's going through Saul's mind. He's just a kid. He's just a young man. Good boy, right? Samuel said unto the cook, Bring the portions which I gave thee, out of which I said unto thee, Did the clock stop? What time y'all got? Goodness gracious. And the cook took up the shoulder and that which was upon it, and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, Behold, that which is left, set it before thee, and eat. For unto this time hath it been kept for thee, since I said, I have invited the people. So Saul did eat with Samuel on that day. So you can go ahead and read a little bit more about Samuel. Let's jump on down to verse 10. 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 1. Then Samuel took a vow. I think we're going to look at some signs. Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head and kissed him. That would be anointing oil. He anointed him with oil and said, Is it not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be captain over his inheritance? And notice a big old question mark there. Is it not because the Lord has anointed thee? There's a reason why I'm pouring this oil on your head. The reason I set you at the head of the table. The reason I kissed you, is it not because the Lord has appointed you to be king over my people? When thou art departed from me today, then thou shalt find 2 men by Rachel's sepulchre in the border of Benjamin at Zelzah. And they will say unto thee, The burrows which thou wentest to seek are found. And lo, thy father hath left care for the burrows, and sorroweth for you, saying, What shall I do for my son? Then shalt thou go on forward from thence, and thou shalt come to the plain of the Tabor, and there thou shalt meet thee 3 men going up to God to Bethel. One carrying 3 kids, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a bottle of wine. So here's a whole bunch of signs. Saul, I told you, has not God anointed you captain? Now, here's all these signs. I ain't making this up. I have been told from God. Now here's some signs. Go do this, and this is what's going to happen. Go do this, and this is what's going to happen. So Samuel knew everything that was going to happen to Saul, and he wanted Saul to realize that, right? We're going to skip on down to, I'm going to say that Saul wound up amongst prophets in verses 10 through 12, prophesying himself like a prophet prophesies. Saul done that. And how did he do that? By the Spirit of God. Huh? The Spirit of God can help the judge, can help the king, can help the preacher, can help the song leader, can help everybody. It's by the Spirit of God. We all operate by the Spirit of God. Saul's uncle, we read a little bit about in 13 through 16. Don't know anything about him. Don't know who he was or what he did. It's just a strange thing they throw in there. Where in the world is Saul? Verses 17 through 27. So they're having this big meeting, and Saul is the headliner of the meeting. But you know what was not to be found at this big meeting amongst the children of Israel? No Saul. You know where he was? He was hiding. He was hiding amongst the stuff. He's like, wait a minute. I don't want any, he hid out. And where's Saul? And the Lord said, he's among the stuff. You can't hide from God, so can a preacher go on and on and on about that? 1 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 4, you find out a little bit. They're going to have some trouble with the Mennonites. Not Mennonites. Sorry, I do it every time. Not Mennonites. Ammonites, right? And he's going to prove himself through these Ammonites. Matter of fact, he's going to make a big show of how some of you are scared and some of you ain't, and here's what's going to happen. Here's what you're all going to do, Saul said. Saul got in on this action, and they fought the Ammonites. And then verses 5 through 7, the Spirit of God. And then verses 8 through 15, we're not going to have time to get to. Go home and read it. You're going to find the first king of Israel, a man anointed to be the very first true blue king of Israel. What do we know about him? Gnarly young man. Good young man. Very wholesome, goodlier young man. A polite young man. A man who was given a task, and he's going to keep that task at all costs. That's what we find. He was big, tall, man's man, a leader. natural born. I think that's what we learned from Kish, that this Saul was a natural born leader. Also, he was naturally born huge. So, we'll leave it at that. It's a lot of chapters they wanted us to go through. What was I thinking that I could go through 3 chapters, 1 Samuel? Challenge you. Go home and it won't hurt to read Judges chapter 21. So what in the world was up with the Benjamites, and why in the world, right out of that bunch, did God call the first king? So read that, read next week's lesson. So is there any comments or questions before we dismiss? Let's all stand.